it blows my fucking mind that the Republican Party, like the leader of the Republican Party, is like talking about fucking giving money to the American public.
This morning to news.
Yeah, fucking call the FBI if you have knowledge that we are not privy to. What the fuck do you mean?
About volatile markets overseas, including a giant drop in Japan, and it got us kind of worried. Also, a little confused. Fortunately, we have Jill Schlesinger's phone number. We woke her up in the middle of the night, and she graciously agreed to join us to break it all down for us. Jill, good morning. Thank you.
Glad to be with you this morning.
All right, so let's talk about these sharp downturns in international market. Really, really large downturns. What do you make of it?
Well, last week we got some disappointing data about the U.S. economy. So we found out that the jobs that were created were fewer than expected, and the unemployment rate actually went up to 4.3%. We've seen 4 consecutive months where the unemployment rate is creeping up. And you put that together with the earnings reports from Starbucks and McDonald's, and all of a sudden we started to worry that maybe consumers are under pressure, the job market isn't as strong. Then we get this generalized fear that the economy is slowing down, maybe headed into a recession. That caused stocks to sell off last week in the U.S. We saw the selling continue globally overnight. And this morning we are looking at a potential another down day on Wall Street.
So for investors who are looking at the market, and Jill, we talk about this a lot, people try to time the market. What should they be doing in response to what we're seeing?
When I see stuff like that, I think to myself, best possible system we have. Can't ever get any better. If you even dare suggest like an alternative to this stuff, or even like restraining the structure that we currently have, I will call you a psychopath, okay? You are wrong. It's the best system. Shut the fuck up.
If you are a long-term investor, take a deep breath. It is very scary, I get it. But if you're investing for decades in the future, even if you're 60 years old, you're investing for decades in the future, you stay still, you do nothing. You try to maintain your game plan. If you need cash within the next 6 to 12 months, then that money never should have been at risk. Hurry up, go sell it, put it in someplace safe. But as long as you're in a long-term investment portfolio, you shouldn't worry. One other thing you should be happy about, we've talked so long about how interest rates are high, they're coming down. Interest rates tend to come down as economies slow. So we'll see this morning. Mortgage rates, they're lower right now than they've been for all of 2024, Vlad.
All right, Jill Schlesinger for us. Thank you, Jill, for getting up just for us.
I thought this was all because Japan added new interest rates to their currency, and all the companies that have been buying yen for extra buying power, then converting it to USD, were now being fucked by interest rates. So now, to pay back their loans, they're shoveling all their shares out to pay back loans. I'm too stupid to understand the global economy, but that is what I read as well. But I don't know. There was also a massive coinciding crypto dip as well. Japan stopped at making hentai. That's why the market crashed. Yeah, that's what I heard. But that's what I've heard as well. But I do find it funny. I think it's probably a multitude of different issues. Obviously, like the American economy, probably the predictors of for the American economy, possible war. I mean, I guess that's usually good for defense stocks, but war and the subsequent energy crisis that will come out of that is going to lead people into thinking we need to be a little bit more careful with our investments. Because as I've said before, and I've repeated time and time again, it's not necessarily just like Iran versus Israel. It's not necessarily Iran versus Israel versus America. It's Iran and other regional actors that might disrupt energy production for the entire fucking planet. That's how this stuff plays out. AI bubble burst. Tech was insanely overvalued as a correction in the market. I don't think this is a legitimate bubble burst. I think if it was an actual bubble burst, it would be significantly larger than this. But anyway, let's see what Trump is saying about it.
Richard Quest is here to break it all down and try to explain to our viewers and to me why this is happening. Explain the sell-off.
The fundamental
AI is not a bubble, and this was just a regular correction. AI absolute tech is a bubble, and it hasn't burst yet.
reason
AI
for
is
the
a
sell-off
part of
is the
that.
fears that the Fed's high interest rates, 11 increases in 2 years, has basically clobbered inflation and has also hobbled the general economy. We saw that on Friday with the unemployment and the job creation numbers. They were poor to bad. Not dreadful, poor to bad. But now everybody's starting to say the Fed's left it too late to reverse course and cut interest rates. And so this is the effect. Stocks are starting to fall because there is a fear now the economy will slow. Still a minor chance of a recession. Less than 30%, say most people, but it's a question of fear. And since you're talking inside politics, you have to factor this in to the equation. Donald Trump is already calling this the Kamala crash. There is a political angle to this. The Fed, too late. The Kamala Harris, part of the whole Inflation Reduction Act, the whole stimulus package at the beginning of the Biden administration. There's politics reeking throughout.
I just have one quick follow-up question. If the Fed would have
Gilbert
lowered
British
interest rates,
Godfrey.
as many expected them to do last week, I believe it was, could this have been prevented?
No, coulda, shoulda, woulda. It would have had to be much earlier. The so-called monetary lag takes about 6 to 12 months. What they would have done would have been to have created an impression that the Fed was helping Kamala Harris. The Fed says, I see no politics, I hear no politics. We move forward regardless of politics. They've done it before. They just move forward. But either side would claim a move at this point, as indeed in September. If they do not move in September, Dana, choose your restaurant, I'm buying you dinner. All right? They're going to move in September. They've telegraphed it so well, people can't accuse them of being politically biased.
That sounds fun. I will choose my restaurant and we can have dinner no matter what happens. Thanks, Richard. Appreciate it.
Damn, Donna. Chill. You got a husband. Damn. They're fucking. I'll say it.
Joining me here in New York today, CNN's John Berman, Maggie Haberman of the New York Times, and Michelle Price of the Associated Press. I mean, it's so interesting. Yes, okay, the Fed says that they're not political. They try to do things outside of politics, but there are people who think that they didn't do the reduction in part because they worry that the thumb would be on the scale. But if they lower the interest rate, even at all in September, that's closer to the election.
Correct, and they're going to face accusations of playing politics if that's the case. You have two dynamics here. One is, as Richard said, Donald Trump is already seizing on this. And
let's put that up on the screen while you speak. I'm sorry to interrupt you there. Where is it? There you go. Trump cash versus Kamala crash. Go ahead.
Right, and so I think that this is giving Trump something, to frame the race around, to frame her around after she has had a real honeymoon.
Bro, think about that, bro. He's still running on the Trump bucks, dude. Yo, that's crazy. That is like a genuine attitude change. It blows my fucking mind that the Republican Party, like the leader of the Republican Party, is like talking about fucking giving money to the American public. Like, for a lot of you that is just like only recently paying attention, maybe for the last like 2 election cycles, you're like, what? That's not that weird. It's like, no, dude. The Republican Party has actively petitioned against social safety nets, and they still do to a certain degree. The fact that the guy, the most popular Republican technically, or the guy who's like their presidential candidate and the leader of the party, is actively pivoting to be like, I gave you money, remember that shit, is crazy. That is fucking nutty to me. As someone who's been covering this shit for 10 years professionally and has been paying attention for a lot longer, that is crazy to me. I would never think that.
Period in the headlines, and that has been stymieing him and his team in a way that's been pretty palpable. And then you are going to have the vice president have to explain fiscal policy of this administration. You are going to see in the next 3 months, 2.5 months, Republicans and Trump try to tie her to Biden, as firmly as possible. That the Biden record is her record. It's been surprising there hasn't been more of that. I think that this gives them an opening.
John, I spoke to LaFonza Butler, who is the appointed senator from California, also happens to be somebody who was an aide to Kamala Harris, very close with her, and asked her about that very question, about how she, this is, of course, before the markets dropped. It was on State of the Union yesterday, but it was about how she navigates her own vision for the
Republicans aren't running on handouts. Yeah, I will never. It's not handouts. Don't call it that. Don't say buying your vote. That's what politicians are supposed to do. They're supposed to buy your fucking vote. Don't be fools about this. That's not a bad thing. That's a good thing. Okay? Democrats should actively say, hey, the only cash that this fucking piece of shit ever gave was, one, to billionaires in the form of massive tax cuts. Okay? The omega wealthy at a time when their profits were sky high and you were suffering. And his party has actively stopped us from giving you cash when we wanted to expand child tax credits. No, not the PPP shit. Chat, don't even bring up the PPP, okay? Don't. That plays well here, doesn't play well across the board. Americans fancy themselves to be small business owners. They think small businesses are fucking awesome. You can't fucking attack small business owners. You can maybe say that there's like corruption in the PPP process that the Trump administration allowed to happen, where like big corporations got millions and millions of dollars or whatever. But ultimately, most Americans literally think that they're all small business owners that will make it to be billionaires one day. So you can't really tackle it on that end. You could just say, like I said, all you need to fucking do is say, Donald Trump gave handouts to the billionaires. We wanted to help ease the financial stress that everyday Americans experience. We wanted to expand child tax credits that literally eviscerated child poverty in half. And the Republicans stopped that from happening. Okay? Pick your fighter. Do you want a guy who's going to give handouts to the billionaires only? Or do you want a guy who has your back? That's all you got to say.
the economy versus the fact that she's part of this administration. Let's listen.
There is no doubt that there's fear and anxiety for working families all across this country. And the history and the record of the vice president is that she has stood arm in arm, shoulder to shoulder with those working families her entire career. I think she's going to own that and expect her to have an economic plan that continues to include all of the American people.
John?
In the, 15 days of her rollout so far, every time she has spoken, she has seemed conscious of this to try to not make the mistake that President Biden sometimes made when talking about the economy, painting a super rosy picture when people might not be feeling it. She got to the I hear you part of that message more quickly maybe than he did every time she spoke. But the challenge here is this, right? Biden, when he was still running, and his entire team, they were trying to explain why people were feeling so bad at about the economy when the numbers were so good. It gets more challenging if the numbers aren't so good, right? So that is something that the Harris team, I don't think were thinking about when they began their campaign 15 days ago, but now have to think about it. It's something, things keep changing, and they're in a new place today.
It's 15 days, but it does feel like 15 years.
Yes.
At least 15 months.
Yeah, I mean, the Trump campaign has already started not only using that hashtag, but they've been repackaging the memes that Harris's team has been putting out there. They just a little bit ago this morning posted the brat meme with, the stock market is tanking in the font, that everything that has been in this honeymoon period might seem kind of silly compared to when people are looking at their 401ks or when they're going to start looking at gas prices or they're looking at what it costs at the grocery store, that the hype that is kind of coming back down to earth, we might be entering that phase that the Trump campaign has been waiting for.
And I'm going to get to MJ Lee in 1 second, but I just want to ask you, because you know Donald Trump's brain on these things more than anything, as you were talking about what they're doing with the brat meme, I'm thinking about back in 2020 when the stock market, the economy was really great pre-COVID and he was feeling wonderful. And although the stock market isn't, Wall Street isn't Main Street and they're definitely different, he's a New Yorker and that's his worldview.
It's his go-to.
It's his go-to.
And he has treated the stock market as something of a pole. We saw that in the White House years well before COVID. In 2017, when he did his tax cuts and then he did his tariffs, and he had some of his advisors, most of them outside the White House, but not only outside the White House, saying to him, these are creating cross currents and this is potentially a problem. He would say the stock market's doing great, the stock market's doing great. And he often looks to some tangible, and often it's numerical, sign that he can say, look, see, I was right. And so look, he has set this up a bit where it's heads he wins, tails everyone else loses. You know, he says if there's a crash,
That's shocking, Maggie.
Right. If it's a crash, it's because he was right, and if there isn't a crash, it's because they want him back and they know he might be coming back. But I do think, to John's point, voters, it's not Main Street, but there are a lot of voters who understand this, and they can see on their TV screens that this is not good news.
Yeah, no question. Okay, let's turn to what's happening with the vice president as we are all on pins and needles trying to figure out who she's going to pick. Today, she is going to join the president, though, in the Situation Room to discuss the situation in the Mideast. As